Welcome in, everyone. This is The Way, a spiritual dojo, the path to unconditional love. This is a very special day because this is the very first day. And we have an amazing human being here. I know this gentleman, this man from doing a lot of stuff with him, but mainly I had a very huge activation with him through a retreat and had a very transformative experience. And what better way to start the first episode with Zack Blakeney. So just to give you a little context of Zack is a renowned transformative guide and healer. He's got a very rich history of assisting high performers to heal from addiction. And he possesses a profound ability to spark transformative change with about 10 years of experience guiding individuals to unveil their inner divinity. And with that being said, welcome in, Zack.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction, Jared.
You're welcome, brother. You're welcome, brother. What better way to introduce it by Zack? I remember the first, so when I did this journey with Zack, where I did his retreat that he guides, psilocybin retreats. And I remember when my ceremony was coming to a close, where I could feel that this was the day that I was doing psilocybin, and when I felt it kind of relinquish, I looked up. I was actually on a rock, and I was around water, and I looked up, and I saw Zack, like, up on a hill, and I remember just having this moment of, God? Like, just saw this guy, this figure standing up there. Yeah. But yeah, Zack, I'd love to. You've been writing a book. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I just want to say briefly, I was looking down at you on the rock and saying, God?
Let's
Yeah,
go.
I'm in the process of writing a book right now. I'm actually just getting started today. So right
Oh,
after this,
fantastic.
yeah, right after this, I'm going to be working through this. And once I came into, I guess, a little backstory about being in Mount Shasta, because obviously I'm stationed in Austin. I was out here for the Lionsgate portal, 8/8, and for a retreat. And when I came out here, this area is vibrating at a very high frequency, and I could feel it in the land. And a lot of people that come to Mount Shasta say the mountain calls them, and ultimately there's a lot of truth to that. This area is just very highly conscious. And when I was here, I just knew that I was going to be coming back. And by the time that I had left Mount Shasta, my inner voice popped up and said, "You're going to go back for a month." I said, "Okay, all right." And I'm to the point now where I'm just listening and following and trusting and having faith that what it is that I'm being called to do is aligned with my highest good. So I've been wanting to write a book for a long time. I've been talking about it for years, probably since I was 30, and had all these different titles and things and ideas, and just so much came through. And when I came back here, I was meditating and staring at the mountain. And it was a couple of days ago, and I knew I was going to come back here to write, but I didn't know what it was going to be. And as I was meditating, my inner voice, or God within me, speaks and says, "You're going to write about the 4 keys to the kingdom." And I said, "Okay." And interestingly enough, these are keys that I've been teaching, but I haven't put them into into something that's like digestible in a sense of what this is going to be. So the four keys to the kingdom being heart-based consciousness, or fourth density consciousness, or heaven, if we wanted to call it that.
Mm.
These are states of being. So, Master Yeshua said, the kingdom of heaven is within you, right? And ultimately, the kingdom of heaven is the opening of the heart energy center into unconditional love. And there's traits, there's characteristics of unconditional love, and that's what these keys are. So the four keys, and we'll have a chance to talk about all of them, but the first key is honesty is the key to reality. Second key is that suffering is the key to compassion. The third key is transparency is the key to freedom. And the fourth key is forgiveness is the key to grace.
Mm.
So when we look at these, you can imagine that, honesty, suffering, transparency, and forgiveness are keys that are opening a door. And they're opening a door into the heart, into the higher consciousness. And again, the doors that get opened are reality,
Mm-hmm.
compassion, and freedom and grace. So these are states of being. And, as I've been on my journey, I realized a couple of years ago that for me to be who I am called to be, it is a state of being, not a state of doing. And typically when we see ourselves in the future, we see ourselves doing things. And we've been conditioned by our external environment in a very backwards way, which is ultimately, if I do something, I can have something, and then I'll be someone. And that is externally conditioned, and it is backwards. Because it's really, if I be someone, I can do something with that, and then I can have what it is that I want. So it's a completely different looking at the world from an inside out point of view rather than an outside in.
Mm.
So when I started to work with these states of being, the first state of being that I started to work with, because I was struggling with addiction, porn addiction and drug addiction, and really, this is back when I was 30. I'm 38 now, and I still struggled with using pornography after when I would consider myself an addict. There was a point in which it became so infrequent that I was like, I'm not addicted to this thing anymore, but I was still using it. And ultimately, it was that moment where I was like, if I really want to heal, I need to start looking at, and when I mean heal at this point, I mean let it go for good. I need to start looking at the moments that I choose into this experience of watching pornography. And what would be the state of being that would best serve me to no longer watch this? And ultimately, I came to honesty being that state of being. Because the reality that I wanted to live in was without pornography in my life. And for me to not watch that anymore, I needed to be honest with myself, which when I define honest, it's being one with what is. And what is no longer watching pornography. So when I would have moments of my body being triggered to want to watch because I was sexually aroused, I would remember, well, what's honest is I am creating a reality without pornography. So I'm choosing not to do this anymore. And as I did that, I had to make multiple choices during like a momentary, let's call it a desire to watch. Is that okay?
Mm.
Well, it'll go away, and then I say, oh, no, well, I kind of want to, but yeah, okay. Well, we're being honest still. Nothing's changing. Still honest. And then
Mm.
my body would chill out, or it'd be like, oh, but I'm still sexually aroused. That's okay. We're going to learn how to transmute that energy. We're going to use it in a different way.
Mm.
Okay, okay, cool. All right, right. So that was a big deal for me. And as I started to realize the benefit of that, then I started to use the lens of honesty in all areas of my life. And ultimately, if honesty is being one with what is, it's about being one with what is inside of you. So if you were to put on the honesty glasses and you were to look at your, let's just say there's four primary um, areas that people look at in their life that they judge for happiness and fulfillment. We could say health, finances, um, relationships, and let's say platonic relationships, and then also romantic relationships, and just say those are the four areas. And if you were to look at
Mm.
the word honesty and put on your glasses and then look into those four areas, you would find where the areas that you are being dishonest are the areas that you suffer. The areas that you're being dishonest are the areas in which you do not get what you want, and you end up settling for uh, the thing that you don't want, whatever that might be. So, this is a conversation, so see what's coming through for you at this point, brother. So,
Yeah.
what's showing
Well,
up?
I just want to say that was juicy because I was just sitting here, sitting back, and felt like I was getting like a little mini masterclass. No, when you're saying these things, the first thing that comes up for me, um, uh, well, there's multiple things that come up for me, but one of the things that came up for me is as you were talking about your addiction to pornography, because I too had a addiction to pornography as well. Um, I never saw it in that way of like getting honest with myself, but it's so true because that's ultimately how the addiction was able to loosen its grasp because I started to really get honest with why or what was happening when the desire came up, or it's like I'm getting aroused and
Hmm.
uh, yeah.
Yeah, and the honesty is the honesty to your heart, right? So if I was like when we talk about who am I being honest with, I'm being honest with my heart. I'm being honest with my higher self. Um, I'm being honest with my state of heaven,
Yeah.
right? And in my state of heaven, pornography was not a part of that.
What would you say? Because you talk about the heart, and I'd love for you to dive in a little bit about deep about the heart chakra
Hmm.
and why is that important in all of this process you're going through. I mean, even you becoming a healer or like a guide, why is the heart chakra so important in just the healing process?
Yeah, so the heart chakra is the source of unconditional love, and it is my belief, and that's a belief that's been confirmed by my experience, that God is unconditional love, and that we
Mm,
are all fractals of the Creator, and the Creator is only unconditional love. Now, again, there are different characteristics of unconditional love, which is what these keys are. And ultimately, we're making our way back to the remembrance that we are the Creator. That the Creator is the creation and the creation is the Creator. There is no separation between the two, but we find ourselves in a certain um, density or dimension of experience in third dimension, which is more related to the solar plexus, in which we forget that we are one with our Creator, one with God. Now we do that and choose to do that before we come onto this planet because it gives us the opportunity to have a richness of experience. What I mean by that is that if you were to imagine that you are in, let's say you're a pilot, and like there's flying a plane, and then there's the practice of flying a plane inside of a simulator. So if I'm flying a plane in a simulator, I'm not actually in the plane. I'm in the simulation, right? It's like there's not as much at stake. Right? I know I'm not going to crash. I'm not going to die. I'm not being threatened because I'm in a simulation.
Mm.
But then I practice there. But then if I go and fly, right? Well, now more things are at stake. You know, I actually have people in my plane, and it's just a completely different experience. So we choose to come into a simulation, but we think it's real. And we think it's real to the point where we forget that we are not one with God because we need the safety wheels taken off so that we can find safety in our experience. We rediscover safety inside
Mm.
of the third density experience. And for me, the ultimate safety is the realization that God is all around you. You are held by God. I'm sitting in God right now as I'm sitting on this seat.
Mm.
And when we're to this point of understanding that God is everything and that I'm being held by God in this experience, that's the only true safety that I know. Because that is what brings you to the heart level. That's when your root chakra and your heart chakra become aligned with the realization that I'm being held by unconditional love. I can only feel safe. Now, go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, can you expound a little bit on the word simulation?
Yeah. Yeah, so a simulation or illusion is something that we would call not real. Now, when I talk about reality, like honesty being the key to reality, right? Reality is your experience. And there's an ultimate reality that is beyond the physical form. It's in the non physical space, which ultimately that's why reality is an internal experience, it's not an external experience.
Mm.
With simulation or illusion, the reason why, you know, mystics and gurus have called what we look at and what we see out in the physical an illusion is because it's changeable. It's permeable. It can be changed through your will, and it can be changed much faster through your will united with God's will, with divine will. But that's why I use the word simulation, is because ultimately it can change by our power within. There are things that can't change. Unconditional love will never change.
Mm.
The definition of unconditional love will be the same 1,000 years from now, 10,000 years from now, 1,000,000 years from now. It will go on through infinity of being the same experience. So that's what I mean by a simulation.
Got it. Got it. Um, you were saying something before I asked that question. Was there something that you wanted to share?
Oh, I was just going to bring up that I'm sitting very environmentally safe inside of an Airbnb on Mount Shasta. It's much more difficult for people to comprehend this maybe in the middle of Gaza right now, right? Or Lebanon or Ukraine.
Mm.
And those are just using obvious areas of bellicose action that's happening between humans. Um, but the ultimate reality underneath all of that violence is that God is still there. And it's the lack of recognition in that space. Even worse, it's the belief that one ethnicity or religion is more correct than the other about belief in God. Because if we look at Palestinians and God, we're talking about Jews and Islam, right? So
Yeah.
Jews and Muslims. The core dissonance between the two is whether or not their belief in God is right over the other one.
Mm.
And then we can add on the physical appearance and land and all these other things. But the core division of those societies is that. Now, here's the insanity of that. That's God killing God over their belief in God.
And I laugh because it's like it is insane.
It's the insanity of the human ego that we've attempted to put the ultimate creator in a box of how the creator is. And human beings will never be able to do that. We're finite beings attempting to explain the infinite. The closer I get to truth, the more love I feel, but I'm never going to be able to speak ultimate truth to anybody until I'm back with the creator. And at that point, Zack doesn't exist.
Mm, mm. It's just releasing the attachment of your identity and just letting the creator flow through.
100%. I'm here, and I know that I have a name. That name is uh, really used by others. I mean, I use it, I guess, for myself. I got my ID and like things like that, and but really, a name is for other people to recognize you, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, like for me, if I was walking around this world, you could call me dude with a beard, and that's fine. Some people call me that. I mean, that's fine too. It doesn't matter. But ultimately, when we start, I think this might be a good transition to just go into the second key, and we're talking about suffering as the key to compassion. I mean, if we look at what's
Yeah.
going on in Gaza, in Israel, um, it's terrible. If we look at what's going on in America, like it's interesting because the news feeds us what they want us to see without the realization that we have some grave issues here in America right now. And ultimately, the government doesn't care about the U.S. people, it just cares about war. And with that being said, we also have so much more benefit and privilege than those that are in the middle of war, than those that are in what we would consider, third world countries and things like that.
Yeah.
But true compassion comes from first realizing your own suffering. Like, you cannot truly be compassionate towards somebody else's suffering until you know your own.
Mm.
If I want to be, and we can use compassion, so compassion in a simple definition means to suffer together.
To suffer together.
And when we suffer together, suffering disappears because we're no longer alone. So when we suffer together, the only way I could suffer with somebody else is that, again, I would know my own suffering first. And this is what opens up empathy. I have done the exploration deep into my own shame. The shame of sexual shame, of porn addiction, which ultimately relates to authentic shame, authentically shaming my self-expression and judging myself and seeking validation. I mean, I've done all those things. And ultimately, the reason why I know when somebody else is feeling shame is because I know what shame feels like. So because I know what shame feels like when somebody is with me, when you were at the retreat, when people are around, my intuition is formed off of the energetic resonance of what I'm feeling in front of me and the person I'm feeling in front of me, and that informs my mind what's going on. But because I can feel the shame in somebody else, I can be compassionate towards it. I can speak to it. I can speak to it to a place where I can empathize with it, and I can bring a level of compassion to them, which gives them an opportunity to cultivate self-compassion.
Mm. Would you say that, because you're writing this about the keys to the kingdom, um, when I guess my question is, when you talk about the kingdom, are these facets the kingdom meaning inner heaven, or what does the kingdom what does that mean to you?
The kingdom, to me, can mean a lot of things. To me, it means energetic oneness with God. It means oneness. So if we look at the figures of our past that have attained this level, they all speak of it from the same space. And ultimately what they're all saying in different form is oneness. Buddha really talked about oneness. Yeshua said, the Father and I are one. Right? We look at Hermes Trismegistus, the man that taught the Hermetic principles. The first Hermetic principle, right, is the principle of, all. So when we look at these principles and we look at all these people, and there's so many others that have not become figureheads, that have not been recognized. So for what I know from my own remembrance, we talk about Melchizedek. Melchizedek was a priest 2,000 years before Yeshua. We look at Enoch. Enoch, walked on earth and walked with God, right? And that's the only thing that we see in Genesis. We have a whole book in Enoch about a gentleman that was able to essentially ascend. And ascension, when we talk about this, is coming from, again, the third density experience, the solar plexus being activated, to the heart chakra that's opened up throughout your being. And this is, in other ways, it's called the causal body. It's where your soul is. It's the seat of the soul.
Causal body. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so it's called the causal body because it's the seat of the soul. The soul is that cause. Ultimately, the ultimate cause of you being on this planet is that your soul, prior to this incarnation, chose to incarnate into this body and become a character named Jared. So it is the cause of movement. It is the cause of life. So if we look at the principle of cause and effect, the principle of cause and effect that says there's a cause for every effect, there's an effect for every cause, that goes dimensionality. It's layers. So it's not just happening in this experience. Ultimately, there is karma, which is just the energetic inertia of a pattern that many people, including myself, cleared for my ancestors. Well, who are my ancestors? My ancestors are just me and my past. They're just a different version. So cause and effect, I could be healing something with someone on this planet that is a friend that was my mom 300 years ago in life. And we replay out a pattern just in the different forms. But when we heal that pattern as friends, we actually healed the karma that came from when that person was a mom. That's just an example. I don't have that as an example.
That's pretty cool, though. I just immediately was like, "Whoa."
So again, cause and effect is not limited to our ego. So when we start looking at suffering in that way, when we start looking at suffering as, and to define suffering, suffering is just the denial of pain. So when we deny pain over time, we suffer. And the simple formula for suffering is pain plus avoidance over time equals suffering. So when I avoid my pain or deny my pain over time, I suffer. And there's really only one source of pain. It's emotional pain. Like when I mean this in the sense, of course, there's physical pain. Like I'm not saying that like there's not physical pain, but your emotional state, your emotional response to physical pain is what creates pain. So I'm open to the possibility that although Yeshua suffered, that there was a moment where he most likely did not. There's a moment where he most likely was able to move past the physical pain of the body to endure what he endured so he could be who he was.
You talking about the resurrection? Or him?
The crucifixion, right?
Crucifixion.
Right. And interestingly enough, the crucifixion isn't the atonement. The resurrection is the atonement. Right? And the
explain what atonement means.
Atonement is just back to being one with God. That is what atonement is, to put everything back to reality, to put everything back right, to put everything back to oneness. So when I talk to Christians and I have conversations with them, and especially when it comes to me opening up to the possibility to them that they are also Christ, that we are all Christ, and it's just the realization of that state inside of ourselves, they'll say, well, you haven't come back from the dead. Well, I haven't died yet. So like that judgment is way off. And I'm not sitting here saying that I'm going to come back from the dead, but like it's like these are the things that are so far off. Well, so your measure of whether somebody is a Christ is whether they get raised from the dead. There are different Christs for different ages.
Mm.
We're in the Aquarian age. Yeshua was the Christ of the Piscean age. 2,000 years before that was Melchizedek. I'm not sure what that age, I think it was the Sagittarian age. 2,000 years before that was Enoch, right? So these ages are the 2,000 years that these different constellations come through our sky.
Mm.
But yeah, so the atonement is to put everything back to righteousness, which the only righteousness, the only real righteousness is oneness with God.
Why do you think that Christians are so? I mean, in your experience, I'm sure they could have a completely different viewpoint, but like in your experience of Christians, why do you think they're so stuck on Jesus coming? He's coming back.
Well, because I mean, the first cause is the narrative. I mean, that's the first cause. They've subscribed to a narrative of division, of righteousness, but not in a sense of righteousness towards oneness, righteousness towards one man. And that level of division and righteousness towards the way that they believe creates the hate and lack of compassion and lack of forgiveness, a lack of honesty, right? And a lack of transparency in their towards other people. No openness, right? And ultimately, and again, I'm speaking in generalities. With the ones that these are the people that I've had these experiences with. There are also Christians that are not this way,
Right.
but they're stuck on that because ultimately Jesus was who he was. He was Christ, right? So I mean, like when we look at this and we have some solid proof of what this man did and how he did it, it is miraculous. It's incredible. So if I look at that from that space, I hang on every word that Jesus did. Hang on every word. I also know that the words that are put into that space, when I say I hang on every word, I read the Course in Miracles. Right? And the Bible has beautiful statements as well, but there are so many misperceptions. And one of the most beautiful things from the Course in Miracles said is that the apostles felt so guilty about Jesus being crucified that they had the guilt glasses on when they were writing about Jesus' experiences. So if I have the guilt glasses on and those are my perception and feeling guilty about Jesus' experiences, I'm going to distort it towards guilt rather than unconditional love. So his words are his words, but his words are being taken secondhand. A Course in Miracles takes it and says, no, this is what I said. This is what was said in the Bible. This is what I said, and this is what I meant.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit on this. Your experience and everything about channeling, because that's all the books that I love that have been channeled and immediately gets refuted by certain Christian people. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about just channeling in general.
Again, and the refuting aspect from Christianity is that same level of division that nothing else can come from God but Jesus, right? So then they won't look at any of these other books. They won't look at any.
And how beautiful that, and like how genius that is, that you create a person that only he can, and that just cuts all curiosity and all, in a sense, creation.
Yeah. Yeah. So channeling, there's two forms of channeling that I know of. There's a channeling of the Creator within you, or your soul, whatever you want to call it. So again, what I know Christ consciousness to be is that the fully awakened soul inside of the being, and that the soul is a portion of God. So the soul is God. Right? There's no separation between that. And then we have channeling other entities into your being, because ultimately those other entities are also another form of God. And when you start to realize that, these entities that can be channeled are also another version of you, then the separation between you and that entity dissolves. Now, that form can be rather dangerous without the proper knowing of the type of entities you are channeling and the type of information you are channeling, because there are absolutely positive and negative entities. The channeling from within, coming from the heart, again, once we open up the heart center, again, the kingdom of heaven is within you, God is within you. So if you'd like to channel God, open up your heart. Open up your heart, and you can start to have the Creator flow through you and speak through you. You'll start knowing things that you don't know how you know it. No explanation to why it is that this is true. That's the indescribable knowing that comes from the heart. So these experiences of people channeling, whether it's extra dimensional entities or whether it's God within you, is all God. It's just different forms from different parts of the creation that have different ways of explaining what they believe about God.
Right.
Right?
Because I mean, if it's all God, it's like, if it's all God, it's basically these things are created, and even from the negative polarity, are created to guide you to God. It's like, what I mean by that is the negative polarity is like giving you a lesson. It's like, okay, you've just channeled this negative polarity. There are consequences to that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if it's all God, um, it's all guiding you back, if that's what you so choose to live in that space.
Yeah, and the ultimate reason for the negative polarity is to allow you to polarize positively. So if I'm given an opportunity, for instance, like sexual energy when turned into creative energy is also channeling energy. So if I want to succumb to a negative suggestion and say, hey, why don't you go masturbate to porn? Then I say, hey, oh, no, that's not what I want to do. I'm going to go write a book. Right? I'm going to go open up my channel for healing. I'm going to go and create, heaven on earth. I'm going to go create my life, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
That opportunity of porn is giving me an opportunity to consciously choose and polarize towards serving others. So the ultimate reason for the negative polarity is that it allows you to polarize more quickly to the positive. Because the choice is the axis in which creation turns. The choice is the axis in which you create from. And the more you become conscious of your choices, the more easily it is to polarize, because you're doing something in a conscious way. Most of the reasons why people can't polarize to the positive is because they're unconscious and subconsciously doing things that are both positive and negative. And so they sit in the middle of these oscillating polarity in which they can't actually make any space. And that's what's beautiful about these keys, is that each one of these keys will allow you to polarize positively towards service to others. When you become honest altogether, and you really open up honesty in your life, you are a valuable servant to other people. Because your honesty gives the other people the opportunity to be honest within themselves. That's a level of service, and honest within themselves completely changes their life. Right?
Yeah. Well, when you said that about the honesty, I mean, because when you listed these four keys, they feel very palpable. And the thing that pops up for me with honesty is death. And that comes up for me because how I see things is the people that were coming from this space of authentic honesty was met on the people that were not ready for the truth with violence.
Yeah. And that's typically what it's met with. I mean, if we look at this at a very small level, somebody who is not ready to take the responsibility of being honest in their life will project out their pain onto other people. They will blame other people. They will attempt to make other people look bad. They will manipulate, they will control, and they might not be doing this in a sense of like because they're a bad person. They're just unconscious, and they're unconscious of their unwillingness to take responsibility for being honest because they don't want to look at themselves. Because if they have somebody to blame, then they don't have to blame themselves. But again, that projection of blame is what is creating the suffering. They don't want to. They don't want to look at their own pain, so instead they suffer inside of relationships. They can't hold a partner, or they can't hold a business partner, or they have dissonance with their parents. They have all these different things that are happening because they're not being honest with themselves. Then when they become honest, they create a whole nother different type of conflict. Because the problem is what happens is that when you become honest, the people that were in your life in which you were dishonest with begin to see you as being fake.
Oh.
Well, of course they did, because you were being fake.
Mm.
So you weren't being real, you weren't being honest. So once you become honest, you have to also be ready to let go of everything. Your job, your
Oof.
relationships, right? Maybe it's the type of business that you're running. I mean, this is transformation. This is moving from the unreality of dishonesty to the reality of honesty.
Yeah, wow, that's huge. I mean, that's it's like when you step into the path of growth, it's like shit, you better be ready. You better be ready for all those facets of like, oh, you want to be honest? Well, beautiful. And you're going to be met with all the things to fortify your honesty. I guess that would be the word, fortification.
Yeah, and that's principle of
Um,
polarity. The only way I know myself to be an honest man is I have to know where I'm dishonest. And then I get to choose honesty in those places.
mm.
It only exists, honesty only exists because of dishonesty, negative, positive. Right?
So for you, when you, I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. You, from my understanding, you had channeled the four keys to the kingdom, like that came through as this is the book you're going to write.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm curious about what got you to that point where you were able to um, access uh, access that. Was it just through your yeah, just share a little bit about that.
Yeah, healing from my own suffering. I mean,
Yeah.
going through the healing process. And healing, true healing is the energetic release of emotions from the past from the body. So there are a lot of people that talk about being a healer or going through a healing process. Now, the process of healing, from what I understand it to be, is 3 simple steps. Step number 1 is acceptance. I need to accept all of my reality. I need to accept, all of my past experiences as being what they were. I need to accept my emotions. I need to stop denying that I'm feeling sad. I need to stop denying that I'm depressed. I need to stop denying that I don't have grief that I need to let go of. So it's a full level of acceptance. I need to stop blaming other people. I accept my responsibility in what I have created. Right? So that's what it's really coming to. It's accepting responsibility for your creation as the creator of your reality. And then there's awareness. Okay, cool. Now that I've accepted these things, I get to be more aware of how I don't want to repeat these patterns. Because the lack of acceptance is what repeats the patterns. I don't want to have this anymore. I need to accept and take responsibility for said thing. Cool. Now I'm going to start becoming aware of who it is I intend to be, and then start creating a roadmap to that, and that's the states of being. I can be honest. I can be transparent. I can be compassionate. I can be graceful. I can be an integrous. And then once I start to do that, I start to experience the pathway of transformation with the awareness of knowing, oh, when this happens, sometimes I respond in this way, and this isn't a way I want to respond anymore. What's the state of being that I can call upon to do so? And then once I get to that point, I can start working with forgiveness. Now, forgiveness, the energy of forgiveness is release. Releasing the energy of the past from the body, and that's where true healing comes into play. This is why Yeshua talked about forgiveness so much, because forgiveness is the pathway, another key to the kingdom, to grace. And grace is you are already forgiven. Unconditional love already forgives. You're forgiven before you even did the thing that you thought was wrong. Forgiveness is for humans, to forgive ourselves, so that we can access grace from the Creator. And the forgiveness is what has allowed me over this past year to literally purge energy, stuck energy out of my body in miraculous ways, which has then opened up my energy centers to be completely crystallized and also open. So a channel, if you could think about the energy centers from the root to the crown, the channel of energy is here. So my energy centers are crystallized, my channel is open, which allows the Creator to speak through me, and then allows me to also assist others with transmuting energy out of their body through my channel, which is ultimately what healing actually is. And the healing doesn't come from me, it comes through me. I am not the healer. I give somebody else the opportunity to heal themselves by them, and this is by the strategy of the retreat that you came on, by them choosing into forgiveness, by them choosing to forgive an energy of the past. I forgive myself for shaming my authentic expression. I forgive myself for choosing to shame my sexual expression. I forgive myself for being afraid of judgment. And then through that aspect of it, I become a channel to be able to assist somebody else to remove that energy from the body. And that's what I do now, a part of this.
Beautiful. So you had mentioned, so it was honesty, compassion. What was the third one?
Transparency is the key to freedom. So if we look at honesty, to me, in the duality of honesty and transparency, honesty to me is an internal experience, and transparency is the expression of honesty. So if I'm honest with myself, and I truly come to a place of honesty, and also there's an energetic experience when you open up your heart where you really cannot hold in anything that is dishonest. For me, it reverberates. If I'm not fully transparent about an experience, it kind of reverbs inside of me until it's literally forced out of me. And examples of this are like, I can explain an experience in a vague way, but if I don't go into specific details about why it is that I'm doing something, then it can be manipulative. An example could be, you could tell somebody, oh, I'm going to go eat lunch. And like, okay, and again, this is really basic. And a lot of times when it comes to things that are more difficult to be transparent about, it's a lot harder. We say, I'm going to go to lunch. And that person's like, cool. But the reason why you want to go to lunch is because you don't want to be around that person anymore. The reason why you want to go to lunch is because this person is bothering you and is showing up in a way that is not aligned. But you also love this person. This is your friend, right? So instead of going to, the intention for going to lunch is, hey man, the way that you're showing up right now seems to not be aligned in your highest good. And I love you, and I just want to be honest with you and tell you that, like, I'd really just want to bring you some awareness that you're showing up this way. And because of that, I really can't be in your space right now. I love you, but I can't be in your space right now, and I'm going to go to lunch. That's transparency. Because the transparency is around the intention. So the intention inside of going to lunch is because of I just can't be in the space right now. But if I just say, hey, I'm going to go to lunch, and the guy's like, hey, what's wrong? Oh, nothing. I'm just going to go to lunch. Right? That's not transparency. That's not honesty. You're literally denying the truth of the experience, of reality, of what's actually happening for you. And inside of that, you're leaving. So that's an example of the difference between what I know to be transparent now, which is I am fully transparent about my intentions of doing things, and not transparency, which is essentially being afraid of confrontation, so that in that situation, afraid of confrontation, so I don't have an honest conversation. And I just perpetuate the pattern of this person's behavior that ultimately I'm doing my best for them to see something, and that's me being of service to them. And that's why transparency is being of service as well.
Mm.
I speak about all the different facets of my experiences with porn addiction because I know that that level of transparency is allowing for others to see their experiences through me, and the realization that what is most personal is most universal. What happens for me is happening for others. And once we get to that point, that's another level of service. Again, that is one of the highest levels of service. All of these four keys are the highest level of service in equality under unconditional love that a being can attain in a lifetime.
Yeah, transparency. That's been a huge thing in my life. Just leaning into that. I love that you said that about the part where it's like it begins to reverberate in your system.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like as you've gotten that honest with yourself, it can't sit. Like if you're in that growth aspect, it's not able to sit in your system without it in a sense healing. You're healing yourself in that moment. And I've had moments of that reverberation where it requires me, and this is just how I live my life, requiring me to catch it head on in the moment. And that is yeah, it's a lot. It can be a lot, but I want to use the word juicy because it really is. Those moments are just like there's so much beautiful healing that can happen in just that story that you described, which is, I believe, it sounds like a hypothetical story, but um but it's so true. Just to, like, in that moment, such a seemingly small thing of like, oh no, I'm just going to go to lunch, is actually you perpetuating, in a sense, a war in yourself, and a war between God.
Yeah, yeah, it's a perpetuation of two patterns: the fear of confrontation for the person that leaves and goes to lunch, and for the other guy, because normally when these things are happening in this situation, there's most likely an anxious attachment and anxious avoidance style that's inside of that, right? I
Ah,
mean, because those are the type of people that attract themselves to each other. So like that, and again, we could go down a huge rabbit hole really about like what we could create these two avatars and put them into a space, things that they would be doing just in this one moment, and what could be healed in that one moment, right? Just by
mm,
stepping into honesty. And also having the
mm,
tools to be honest, because there's honesty with kindness and then there's honesty without kindness. And ultimately, to somebody who's receiving honesty, uh, their perception can even think it be unkind when it's coming from a kind place. But this is about, again, do you know that you're coming from a kind place? Are you using
right.
words of love while you're also being honest with somebody? Are you saying, hey, I care about you, and this is why I'm talking to you about this? Hey, are you
Yeah.
open to listening to a reflection so I don't bypass your free will so that you can choose into something? And then
Mm.
allowing yourself to be honest.
Yeah, that reflection aspect. That's something I just, as you get into this, the when you're awakening, you're getting in the healing space. Um, that just kind of, like, I caught on, and I realized I started asking people, "Are you open to reflection?" and things like that. But it is very important. And repeat what you said there. You use reflection because of You had
Yeah.
said,
So another form of service is the respect of free will. Free will is your God-given right to choose, and ultimately, that's your source of power. It's your creative power. It's the source of infinite power. It's the source of equality. There are things
mm-hmm,
that we can look out to all human beings and say, okay, we all have this thing. Well, we all have free will choice. That's a unifying characteristic for everyone. Some people don't feel that way, but that's because they've tricked themselves to believe that that's not true through their free will choice.
mm-hmm.
So when we look at free will choice, if I want to be of service to somebody else, it's not being of service to tell somebody else how to live their life. That's not being of service. What's being of service is me sharing my stories as an opportunity to be a mirror for them. And then also, if they're seeking advice, they actively seek advice. Hey, can you give me a reflection, or can I get some advice here? Cool. They've already chosen into that experience. But for me to go up to somebody and say, hey, you need to be doing this, 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 and this, that's not serving them. But if I listen and I say, okay, cool, I have a reflection, I have some thoughts on that. May I share my thoughts on your experience? And you ask that simple question and they say yes, well, now they've chosen into that feedback. And once they choose into that feedback, they're there, they're going to listen, they're going to accept it. But anybody that's listening right now, and anybody that's ever been given unsolicited advice, that's the reason why it feels bad. It feels icky because I didn't ask for your opinion. That's what somebody would say. And that is your free will coming out as being, again, the source of your power.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just like, as you say that, I'm thinking of just multiple scenarios of that happening in my life, which we don't won't even bring up. Um, so okay, so we've talked about transparency. Is there anything else that you feel you want to share around transparency that is important for the listeners to know?
Yeah, so this goes into the fact that the earth is vibrating at fourth density consciousness, fourth density consciousness being the heart center consciousness. Again, these characteristics are of unconditional love. Transparency is one of those characteristics. If I unconditionally love somebody, I'm fully transparent with them. I don't hide anything. So since the earth, being conscious, is vibrating at it, that's why there is a massive upheaval right now of things coming to light. Transparency is reverberating through the entire collective of humanity. And for
Mm,
those of you that are choosing to still hide, the pain and the suffering is only going to get worse because your environment no longer supports hiding. And when I say your environment, your ultimate environment, being on this planet. So we have to start looking at transparency as being the pathway out of your suffering. It's your key to freedom. Because once you start becoming transparent about the things that you're suffering with, then somebody else can be compassionate towards you. And then the compassion means that you get to suffer together and then your suffering goes away. So that's what I would say about transparency is, look, if anybody is listening now and you are realizing that ultimately the things that you want in your life you don't have, it's because you're not being honest with yourself and you're not being transparent with others. Because you're afraid of what might be, you're afraid of getting what you want, and all that fear, it's a choice that you're making. You're choosing into fear instead of choosing into love.
let that land. Yeah. Wow, I'm the way that you said that too about you know, with what's going on in the world right now, um, that transparency is in a sense people can't hide now, and that's just being reflected in a lot of what I'm seeing on with the news. Um, which is interesting enough because I don't even watch the news, but now it's like I'm getting the reflection of I feel like everybody is really starting to see, hey, this is the news is not as transparent um, as they're led to believe. So it's like I'm just seeing so many different facets of like new things coming up about, weather manipulation and things like that, where people before were just like, that's batshit crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But now there's just a lot of stuff happening that I'm seeing where it's like, wow, it's hard to not see it.
Yeah, I mean, even the news has become more transparent with still the narrative of transparency of how they're going to be transparent. But then there's people that there's still people that report on the lack of transparency of the news. Like, I love Russell Brand. I love his YouTube, right? And there's a lot of
Mhm.
people that are speaking out about seeing the hypocrisy inside the news. I love RFK. RFK talks about the hypocrisy in the news, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's like even the news that's being transparent, more transparent, is being also brought to light through other people that are looking like, look, this isn't transparent either. Like it's just like these layers. It's just these layers of transparency that are coming through. P Diddy and all that coming out, and I'm sure there's going to be more people coming out that have been,
Oh
doing
gosh.
the heinous things that he's been doing, and all the parties
Yeah.
and all the it's all coming out. It's the hidden,
Yeah.
hidden in plain sight. A part of the negative polarity is that they can't actually hide anything from you. You have to show you. And the way that they show is inside of Hollywood, movies and TV shows and, the Vegas Dome and like all these different things that are ultimately, showing what the negative polarity is doing because they can't not show it. It's a part of their magic. It's a part of what they have to do.
Mm.
So the transparency is also coming forward in that space, and these things are coming out. So it's wild. It's also wild to see a lot of musicians that I once listened to that have completely gone into I'm going to use the term satanic/demonic in the way that they present themselves, including The Weeknd. Like I used to love The Weeknd, and like now I see like
Mm.
things that are happening at his show that are and the music videos that he puts out and everything else that are actually very very ritualistic towards the negative polarity.
No.
So Doja Cat and like all these, just a lot of musicians um, that are doing this right now.
Woo, I didn't even know about that with the weekend, but yeah, that's I mean, it's yeah, it's again, it's all coming to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what the last one was grace? Was that
Yeah,
what the
forgiveness being the key to grace. Yeah,
grace?
and like I said earlier, grace is the state of being already forgiven, meaning that like God is experiencing itself through you. Right? So we go into a state of oneness and saying that all your experiences that you're experiencing are also God's experiences. So ultimately, the things that you beat yourself up for and you feel guilty and shameful about are not coming from God because God's having that experience with you, and God isn't the one that's telling you that you're wrong or bad for those experiences. Uh, this is just what's been conditioned through mostly religious morality. They call Yeshua the man without sin, the one without sin. He's out without sin because sins don't exist.
Explain explain that. What do you mean by that?
A sin, in the way that Christianity would like describe or define a sin, is when you
Hmm.
do something that's against God. When you do
Mm.
something that's against God's laws, God's will. Sins are God's will. There's nothing that God doesn't look at.
Ooh, that just hit me. That's good.
Yeah, there's nothing that God doesn't look like. The sin is the will of the creation. Right? That's a part of creation. And then what people consider a sin is subjective.
Ooh, how smart is that to harp on sin hardcore? It just creates that separation from God, but when what you're saying and what resonates in my body is that it's sin is created by God. So So how did you say that you can't be Jesus couldn't be of sin?
Yeah, Jesus was sinless. They say Jesus was a perfect being. Well, he wasn't a perfect being because he didn't sin in the way that religion defines sinning. He was a perfect being because he realized that sins don't exist.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's why
Got
he's
it.
the sinless being. And that doesn't mean that there's a lack of morality. And that's what's really difficult is like Christianity's hang their morality on sinning, on what's bad so they can know what's good. When really, like, what if you just knew what was good in a sense of what was aligned with love, and then saw everything else as an offshoot of a possibility for you to choose love?
Oof, that's good.
So there's there's the realization that there are no sins, there are no mistakes, there's nothing that you've done wrong, you're not bad. There's your experience that you've had, and the experience nets you the opportunity to discover and, well, let's say remember, to remember more of yourself. And what you're really remembering is your divinity. You're remembering that you are love, that you're born into this reality as love and nothing else but love. And then you took on belief systems, and these belief systems told you what was good and bad or right and wrong, and that were consequences for that. And the consequences were centered around whether or not you get into heaven by the way that you act. When Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you. So ultimately, heaven isn't a state that we go to after dying. Hell isn't a state that we go to after dying. Hell is suffering on earth. Heaven is love on earth. It's your choice.
Mm. Mm. Oh, I've said this once to you before, but I find when I have conversations with Zach, it feels like a piece of a pie. Get a slice, and it's like, ooh, that's good. Yeah, that was really good. Um, yeah, with all that being said, I'm thinking about um, you know I was saying that I wanted to do 2 hours, but I'm feeling that this conversation is happening organically and just as it wants to happen. So we may just cut it earlier.
Well,
But is there anything?
I want to say
What's up?
I'll be okay with that too because I'm really excited to get writing. But so
Yeah, let's
yeah,
go.
eat some
That's a
breakfast
good
and then get
place to be. It's like, oh, I'm excited to just like be one with God and
going.
and just right. That's beautiful, brother. Um, is there anything that you would love to share to kind of encapsulate these four keys of just all the things that you've explained on each aspect?
Yeah. So again, the keys are offshoots of unconditional love. They are the keys to opening the door to the heart center. They are the keys to opening up the door to ascension, to living one with God. So when we integrate these keys into our life, when we start looking at these states of being and start aligning with these states of being, you're on a pathway of aligning with your divinity. And as you align with your divinity, you might find that your intuition that was once just a feeling starts to wake up and have a voice. And then you might find that that voice is your soul. And then you might find that that voice as your soul is also the creator. And then you might find yourself being a representation or an example of what Christ was asking us to be, which is Him, which is Christ. And that's where we're going.
Mm,
For those that
mm,
choose to go there, it was Christ that says, to follow me, you need to let go of everything that you have. To follow
mm,
me, you have to be willing to strip down who you think you were so you can step into who you actually are. And that is what these keys are doing. They're stripping down unreality, the reality that was created by your conditioning and by your ego, so that you can step into reality, which is the Creator's reality, which is the reality that is filled with love and abundance and compassion and joy. And that's a difficult path to walk, and not many people will walk it. But there's more people walking it now than there ever has been before.
mm. Amen. Amen to that. Thank you, Zach. Um, where can people find you? Website or wherever? Yeah.
Yeah, so my most active social media is Instagram, and it's just my name, at Zack Blakeney. You can check out a couple of websites. www.thepathinward.com/liberated is the 3-day liberated retreat. I also have www.thepathinward.com/liberated program, which is my program that I coach mostly entrepreneurs and leaders, but I'm also open to all that are called to heal. To go through these 3 steps: acceptance, awareness, forgiveness, to start purging energy from the body, to start stepping into more oneness inside of themselves so that they can experience what I'm talking about.
Mm.
Those would be the areas that you could find me. I also have my own podcast. It's called New Earth Society Podcast, and that's on Spotify, iTunes.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. I mean, and I can't, I can't not recommend Liberated because I was a part of that, and it is a very transformative experience, and I had a lot of shifts happen. So I highly recommend that. Well, that's it, brother. I really appreciate you coming on for the first episode, and to the rest of the listeners here. I'm gonna just the podcast will I'll end up having multiple leaders that are coming in, and so these are just one of the people that Zach, that I have seen as a leader in his life, leading with unconditional love, and look forward to sharing with you the rest of these leaders and just more and more to come. So with that being said, I bid you all adieu. Peace be with you, and let's get the day.